Alone and desperate, Margaret clutched her newborn triplets as the snow swirled around her. Her group of settlers had abandoned her, vanishing into the blizzard without a backward glance. No fire. No shelter. Just the biting cold and the howling wind. She struggled through the storm, feeling her resolve weaken. But as she wavered, a figure emerged from the whiteness, an Apache warrior, composed and steady, observing her intently. She feared the end had come. Yet destiny had other plans. Before we begin, share where you're watching from and subscribe if you believe in unexpected saviors in times of dire need. Margaret stood alone in the snow, holding her newborn triplets close to her chest. The wind howled around her, pushing snowflakes into her face. She watched as the wagons of her group disappeared into the blizzard. They moved quickly, not looking back. She felt a sting in her heart. They had left her behind. The group had traveled together for months. They faced many challenges on their journey. Margaret had lost her husband early on. Despite her loss, she pushed forward, knowing she needed to survive for her children. But as winter hit, everything became harder. The triplets were born during the journey, and caring for them slowed her down. The others decided she was a burden. Margaret pleaded with them, but they refused to listen. Their leader, Mr. Thompson, was firm in his decision. The group needed to move fast to survive the harsh winter. Margaret was left with only a thin blanket and a small bundle of food. As the group vanished into the swirling snow, Margaret felt the weight of her new responsibilities. Her babies needed her. She had to protect them. The storm was strong and the cold bit through her clothing. She wrapped the blanket tightly around her children, hoping to keep them warm. She knew she had to find shelter soon. The wind pushed against her, making each step difficult. Margaret trudged forward, searching for a place to rest. Her legs felt weak and her heart was heavy with fear. The babies were quiet, bundled close to her body for warmth. She whispered to them, promising she would find a safe place. Margaret's thoughts drifted to her late husband. He had been strong and kind, always ready to help others. She missed him dearly. His memory gave her strength. She imagined his voice, encouraging her to keep moving. She knew he would want her to be strong for their children. As the storm raged, Margaret spotted a small grove of trees in the distance. It was not much, but it was something. The trees could offer some protection from the wind. She pushed on, her feet sinking into the deep snow. The journey was slow and hard, but she would not give up. Reaching the grove, Margaret fell to her knees. Exhaustion threatened to overtake her. The trees provided a small break from the wind. She arranged the blanket around her children, ensuring they were as warm as possible. Her own body shook from the cold, but she ignored it. Her babies came first. Margaret's mind raced with fears. What if she couldn't find more food? What if the storm didn't end? She tried to push these thoughts away. She needed to focus on the present. She needed to keep her children safe. Closing her eyes for a moment, she took a deep breath. The sound of the wind was loud in her ears, but Margaret listened for any other noises. She hoped to hear something that would give her hope. Anything that would mean they were not completely alone. But the storm was relentless, and all she heard was the howling wind. As night approached, the cold grew sharper. Margaret knew they needed more than the thin blanket to survive the night. Her fingers were numb, and she struggled to keep her eyes open. She needed to stay awake to watch over her babies. But the exhaustion was overwhelming. In that moment of despair, she looked up and thought she saw a shadow moving through the storm. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it someone from the group coming back? Or was it someone else entirely? Her mind raced with possibilities. She held her breath, unsure whether to feel hope or fear. The figure came closer, moving carefully through the snow. Margaret's heart pounded in her chest. She hoped this stranger would bring help, but she remained cautious. The world was unpredictable, and she had to protect her children. As the figure approached, Margaret could make out more details. It was a man, dressed in furs, moving with purpose. He stopped a short distance away, studying her. Margaret tightened her grip on her babies, unsure of his intentions. The storm continued to howl around them, creating an eerie silence between them. She realized this was a moment of decision. She had to trust, at least a little, if she wanted to survive. She gave a small nod, showing she was willing to accept help. The man, seeing her response, stepped forward. His eyes were kind and his movements were careful. He pointed to the trees, indicating they should move further in for more shelter. Margaret hesitated but knew she had little choice. She followed him, her legs shaky from fatigue. The man led her to a spot where the trees were thicker, breaking the wind more effectively. He gestured for her to sit, then began to work quickly. He gathered branches and snow, creating a makeshift wall to protect them further from the elements. Margaret watched, grateful for the help. She didn't know who he was, but his actions showed he meant no harm. Her body relaxed slightly, tension easing as she realized they might make it through the night. She adjusted the blanket around her babies, ensuring they remained warm. The man crouched down and pulled a small pouch from his belt. He offered her some dried meat and a small amount of water. It was not much, but it was enough to give her strength. Margaret accepted the food, nodding her thanks. She ate quickly, feeling a bit of warmth return to her body. As the night wore on, the man stayed close, ensuring the windbreak remained intact. Margaret found herself watching him, curious about this stranger who had appeared just when she needed help most. She noticed the careful way he moved, always aware of his surroundings. He seemed to know how to survive in this harsh environment. Her babies stirred slightly in their sleep, and Margaret adjusted their positions, comforting them. The storm continued to rage, but she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they would get through this. Maybe the stranger would help them find a way to safety. Margaret's eyes grew heavy. She fought to stay awake, knowing she needed to remain alert. But the warmth of the man's presence and the relative calm of their makeshift shelter lulled her into a sense of security. She drifted into a light sleep, her babies safe in her arms. Through the storm, the man kept watch. He ensured their shelter held against the wind, always vigilant. His presence was a silent promise that they would survive the night. Margaret, even in her dreams, felt a sense of peace knowing she was not alone. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the darkness, Margaret woke. She looked around, finding the man still nearby, tending to their shelter. The storm had eased slightly, the winds calming. She felt a new sense of determination. They had made it through the night, and now she had a chance to move forward. Margaret knew the journey ahead would be challenging, but she felt ready to face it. She had her babies, and she had found an unexpected ally in this man. Together, they could find a way to survive. The storm had not defeated her. It had only made her stronger. The morning light revealed a world covered in white. The storm had left a thick blanket of snow on the ground. Margaret sat up, careful not to disturb her sleeping triplets. The man who had helped her was still there. He was awake, checking the makeshift shelter he had built during the night. When he noticed Margaret was up, he nodded in her direction. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. She smiled back, grateful for his presence. Margaret's mind was clearer now. She needed to keep moving. The place they had sheltered in was not enough for long-term survival. The snow was deep and the cold was biting. They needed a more secure place to stay. Her babies were her top priority. Even if she felt weak, she knew she had to be strong for them. The man understood her need to move. He gestured toward a direction through the trees. It seemed he wanted to guide them somewhere safer. Margaret hesitated for a moment. Trust was hard, especially after being abandoned by her own group. But she had little choice. She needed help, and this man was offering it. She bundled her babies tightly, preparing to follow him. Each step through the snow was a challenge. Margaret held her babies close, their small bodies warm against her. Her legs shook with the effort, but she kept moving. She thought of her husband again, drawing strength from his memory. He would have been proud of her determination. The man moved ahead, breaking a path through the snow. He seemed to know the land well, choosing a route that avoided deep drifts. Margaret followed, grateful for his guidance. The forest was dense, and the trees provided some shelter from the wind. It was cold, but the sun was out, offering a bit of warmth. Margaret's mind wandered as they walked. She thought about the group that had left her. She wondered if they would survive the winter. She felt a mix of anger and sadness. Being left behind hurt, but she needed to focus on the present. Her babies needed her to be strong. After what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. In the center was a more permanent camp. There was a small shelter made of branches and snow. It was simple but looked sturdy. There was a fire pit, and the smell of smoke lingered in the air. It seemed the man had been staying here for some time. The man pointed to the shelter and then to the fire pit. He was inviting her to rest. Margaret felt a wave of relief. She thanked him with a nod, then moved to the shelter. It was small but enough for her and the babies. She placed them down gently, wrapping them in their blanket. They were calm, their small breaths visible in the cold air. The man set about starting a fire. He worked quickly, his movements efficient. Soon, a small flame flickered, offering warmth. Margaret sat close, letting the heat seep into her bones. She watched the man work, curious about him. He was quiet, but his actions showed kindness. She felt a sense of safety with him nearby. As they settled in, Margaret's mind began to relax. She was still worried about the future, but she felt more hopeful. They had survived the night, and now they had a better shelter. She knew they couldn't stay here forever, but it was a start. The man offered her more food, and she accepted gratefully. The dried meat was tough, but it filled her stomach. She needed energy, and the food helped. Her babies were asleep, their small faces peaceful. Margaret stroked their cheeks, feeling a deep love for them. The man sat down opposite her, watching the fire. He seemed content to sit in silence, which Margaret appreciated. She was too tired for conversation even if they shared a language. Actions spoke louder than words in this harsh environment. Margaret's thoughts turned to the future. She needed a plan. She couldn't rely on this man forever. She had to find a way to provide for her children. The land was harsh, but it also held resources. She needed to learn how to survive here. The man seemed knowledgeable. Maybe he could teach her. As if sensing her thoughts, the man began to arrange objects in the snow. He used stones and sticks to create simple shapes. Margaret watched, realizing he was trying to communicate. He pointed to a shape that resembled a shelter, then to the forest. He was showing her how to build. Margaret nodded, understanding his intention. She watched closely as he demonstrated. The process was simple but required patience and skill. She would need to practice. The man continued to explain through gestures and drawings in the snow. Margaret was grateful for his willingness to teach her. The day passed quickly as Margaret learned. The man showed her how to find food, which plants were safe to eat, and how to make a basic snare for catching small animals. Margaret listened carefully, absorbing each lesson. She needed to become self-sufficient. In the afternoon, Margaret practiced what she had learned. She found some berries with the man's guidance and set a simple snare. Her movements were clumsy, but she was determined. The man watched, offering corrections through gestures. His patience was endless, and Margaret appreciated it. As the sun began to set, the camp was quiet. Margaret sat by the fire, her babies now awake and cooing softly. She fed them, feeling a sense of peace. The day had been productive, and she felt more prepared for the challenges ahead. She was learning, adapting to this new life. The man continued to work around the camp, ensuring everything was in order. Margaret watched him, feeling a sense of gratitude. His help had been crucial. She knew she would not have survived alone. She hoped she could repay his kindness someday. As night fell, the wind began to pick up again. Margaret wrapped her babies tightly, ensuring they were warm. She settled into the shelter, feeling the day's exhaustion set in. The fire crackled softly, offering comfort. The man sat nearby, keeping watch. Margaret closed her eyes, feeling sleep pull at her. She was tired but hopeful. She had learned so much in just one day. She felt stronger, more capable of facing the future. Her babies were safe, and she had found a friend in this unexpected place. She whispered a silent thank you to the night sky, grateful for the help and the hope it brought. The storm outside was strong, but inside the shelter, Margaret felt a sense of calm. She knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. She had her babies, her memories, and a new ally. Together, they would face whatever came next. The next morning, Margaret woke to a quieter world. The wind had calmed and the snow had stopped falling. The air was cold, but the sun's light brought a hint of warmth. Margaret stretched, careful not to disturb her sleeping babies. They were bundled tightly, their small faces peaceful. The man was already awake, tending to the fire. He nodded at Margaret, acknowledging her. His presence was comforting, a reminder that she was not alone. Margaret got up, feeling the stiffness in her muscles from the previous day's efforts. She knew she needed to keep moving, to keep learning. Today, she wanted to find more food. The small amount they had would not last long. Her babies needed nourishment, and she had to provide it. The man seemed to understand her need. He motioned for her to follow him, indicating he would show her where to find more supplies. They set out, leaving the safety of their small camp. The forest was quiet, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the snow. The man led the way, moving with a purpose. Margaret followed closely, her babies secured in their makeshift sling. She was determined to learn as much as she could. The man stopped by a cluster of bushes. He pointed out the berries, showing Margaret which ones were safe to eat. He picked a few, handing them to her. Margaret tasted one, feeling the sweet burst of flavor. It was a small victory, this discovery of food. She gathered more, filling a small pouch. They continued on, the man teaching Margaret about the land. He showed her how to find water, pointing out a frozen stream. He explained, through gestures, how to break the ice to reach the water below. Margaret watched closely, eager to learn. She would need this knowledge to keep her children safe. As they worked, Margaret found herself thinking about the man. He was quiet, but his actions spoke of kindness and strength. She wondered about his story, where he came from. She wanted to know more about him, but communication was difficult. They shared no common language, only gestures and drawings in the snow. Despite the barrier, Margaret felt a connection with him. They were both survivors, brought together by circumstance. She was grateful for his help, knowing she would not have lasted long on her own. His presence was a lifeline, a source of hope in the harsh winter landscape. The day passed quickly, filled with lessons and work. Margaret learned how to set a better snare, how to find edible roots, and how to read the signs of the forest. Each skill she gained was a step toward independence. She felt stronger, more capable. As the afternoon sun began to dip, they made their way back to camp. Margaret's pouch was filled with berries and roots, enough to last them a few days. She felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing she had contributed to their survival. Back at the camp, the man started a fire. Margaret prepared a simple meal, sharing what she had gathered. They ate in silence, the crackle of the fire their only companion. Margaret felt a warmth that was not just from the flames. It was the warmth of community, of shared effort. Her babies were awake, their small voices filling the air. Margaret fed them carefully, ensuring they got enough to eat. They were her reason for everything, her drive to keep going. She watched them, feeling a deep love and responsibility. As the evening wore on, Margaret noticed the man watching her. His eyes were thoughtful, as if he was trying to understand her. She met his gaze, offering a small smile. It was a moment of connection, a silent acknowledgement of their shared path. The fire burned brightly, casting flickering shadows. Margaret leaned back, feeling the day's weariness settle in. She was tired but content. They had food, shelter, and each other. It was more than she had hoped for when she was left behind in the storm. Just as Margaret was about to close her eyes, she noticed something in the distance. A figure moved through the trees, barely visible in the fading light. Her heart skipped a beat. For a moment, fear gripped her. Was it someone from her old group? Or was it a stranger? The man noticed too. He stood up, alert, watching the figure approach. Margaret held her babies close, her mind racing. She hoped it was not a threat. She couldn't afford to lose the small measure of safety they had found. As the figure drew closer, Margaret's anxiety grew. But then she saw the stranger's face. It was a woman, wrapped in furs, her face marked by the cold. She moved carefully, her eyes scanning the camp. Margaret felt a mix of relief and curiosity. Who was this woman? The man stepped forward, greeting the woman with a nod. They exchanged a few words in a language Margaret did not understand. The woman seemed at ease, her posture relaxed. Margaret watched, trying to gauge the situation. She hoped the newcomer was friendly. The woman looked at Margaret, her gaze softening. She moved closer, her expression open and kind. Margaret felt a sense of calm wash over her. This woman was not a threat. She was here to help, just like the man who had saved her. Margaret offered a small wave, welcoming the stranger. The woman nodded, acknowledging the gesture. She spoke softly, her voice soothing. Though Margaret couldn't understand the words, the tone was clear. She was offering friendship, an extension of the community the man had started. As the night settled in, Margaret felt a new sense of hope. The world was still harsh, but she was not alone. She had found allies in this unexpected place. Together, they could face the challenges ahead. The storm had brought them together, and now they would find a way to survive. The camp was quiet, the fire's light flickering gently. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She had found more than safety. She had found a new beginning. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. With her babies, the man, and now the woman, she felt a sense of belonging. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt truly hopeful. The next morning, Margaret woke to the sound of quiet chatter. The woman who had arrived the night before was speaking softly with the man. Margaret watched them from a distance, feeling a sense of curiosity. They worked together easily, their movements synchronized. It was clear they knew each other well. Margaret sat up, careful not to disturb her sleeping babies. The morning was cold, but the fire's warmth lingered. She felt more rested than she had in days. The presence of the woman brought a new sense of security. Margaret hoped she could learn more from her too. The woman noticed Margaret was awake and smiled warmly. She approached with a gentle nod, making Margaret feel at ease. The woman gestured towards the campfire, inviting Margaret to join them. Margaret accepted, grateful for the companionship. As they sat together, the woman introduced herself as Niall. She spoke slowly, using simple words and gestures to communicate. Margaret repeated the name, wanting to remember it. She pointed to herself, saying her own name clearly. Niall nodded, understanding. The man, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. He introduced himself as Chaitin. Margaret was pleased to finally know his name. It felt like another step toward building trust. She repeated his name, committing it to memory. Margaret felt a sense of relief. She was not just a stranger in need. She was becoming part of something bigger. The names connected them, turning individuals into a group. Margaret was grateful for this sense of belonging. Niall and Chayton shared a simple breakfast with Margaret. They offered her dried meat and berries. Margaret ate slowly, savoring the food. It was a small meal, but it was enough to start the day. Her babies were still asleep, their small bodies warm against her. After breakfast, Niall gestured for Margaret to follow her. She wanted to show Margaret something. Margaret was eager to learn, so she got up carefully, making sure her babies were secure. Chayton stayed behind, tending to the camp. Niall led Margaret through the trees, moving with purpose. Margaret followed closely, curious about their destination. The forest was quiet, the air crisp and cold. The sun filtered through the branches, casting soft shadows on the ground. They walked for a while, following a narrow path. Niall stopped by a small clearing, pointing to the ground. Margaret looked down, noticing tracks in the snow. Niall explained, using gestures and simple words. The tracks were from animals, a potential source of food. Margaret listened carefully, watching as Niall demonstrated how to read the tracks. She learned to distinguish between different animals, understanding which ones were safe to hunt. It was another step toward survival, another skill to add to her growing list. Niall showed Margaret how to set a more effective snare. Her movements were precise, each step deliberate. Margaret watched closely, eager to learn. She would need to practice, but she felt confident she could master it. As they worked, Margaret felt a sense of camaraderie with Niall. Despite the language barrier, they communicated through actions and expressions. It was a reminder that friendship could form even in the harshest conditions. After a while, they headed back to camp. Margaret carried the knowledge of the morning's lessons with her. She felt more prepared, more capable. Her confidence was growing, and it felt good. Back at the camp, Chayton had prepared a small meal. The three of them sat together, eating in comfortable silence. Margaret felt a sense of peace, knowing she was not alone. She had found allies in this unexpected place. As the day continued, Margaret noticed a change in her own behavior. She was more aware, more observant. She noticed small details she had missed before, a broken branch, a change in the wind. She felt more connected to the world around her. Margaret spent the afternoon practicing what she had learned. She set snares, checked tracks, and foraged for food. Niall and Chayton helped her, offering guidance when needed. Margaret appreciated their patience and support. The day passed quickly, filled with work and learning. Margaret felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing she was making progress. Her babies were safe, and she was becoming more self-sufficient. It was a good feeling, a reassuring sign that she was on the right path. As evening approached, the camp was filled with the soft glow of the fire. Margaret sat with Niall and Chayton, enjoying the warmth. Her babies were awake, their small voices a comforting presence. Margaret felt a deep sense of contentment. But as the night settled in, Margaret felt a lingering sense of unease. She was grateful for the help and friendship she had found, but she couldn't shake the memory of being left behind. The betrayal still stung, a reminder of the harsh realities of their world. Margaret knew she needed to trust Niall and Chayton, but it was hard. She had been hurt before, and the fear of it happening again was real. She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the present. She had to trust, at least for now. Niall and Chayton seemed to sense Margaret's hesitation. They offered reassurance through gestures and expressions, letting her know she was safe. It was a comforting thought, a reminder that she was not alone. The night was quiet, the fire's light flickering gently. Margaret felt a sense of peace, knowing she had found a place where she belonged. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. With Niall, Chayton, and her babies, she felt a sense of hope. As Margaret drifted off to sleep, she reflected on the day's events. She had learned so much, gaining skills and knowledge that would help her survive. She felt stronger, more prepared. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt truly hopeful. The morning sun rose, casting a golden light over the camp. Margaret stirred from her sleep, feeling the warmth of her babies beside her. They were her reason for everything, her driving force. She sat up, looking around. Niall was already awake, tending to the fire. Chayton was not far, gathering supplies. Their presence brought comfort, a reminder that she was not alone. Margaret felt a sense of purpose. She had learned so much in the past days, and now she wanted to put it into practice. She needed to contribute more to their little group. The skills she gained could make a difference, and she was eager to help. After a simple breakfast, Margaret approached Niall and Chayton. She gestured, indicating she wanted to join them in their daily tasks. They understood, nodding in agreement. Margaret felt a surge of confidence. She was part of this team, and she was ready to prove herself. The day was crisp, the air fresh and clear. Margaret and Niall set out together, leaving Chayton to tend to the camp. They moved through the forest, their steps quiet and deliberate. Margaret felt a sense of calm as she followed Niall. The forest was becoming familiar, a place of learning and growth. Niall led Margaret to a spot where the snow had started to melt. Small patches of earth were visible, signs of life beneath the winter's grip. Niall showed Margaret how to dig for roots, using a simple stick to loosen the soil. Margaret watched closely, eager to learn. Margaret got to work, mimicking Niall's actions. Her movements were awkward at first, but she quickly found a rhythm. She dug carefully, uncovering small roots and tubers. It was hard work, but it felt rewarding. Each root was a small victory, a step toward independence. As they worked, Margaret and Niall communicated with gestures and expressions. They shared smiles and nods, a silent language of understanding and friendship. Margaret felt grateful for Niall's patience and guidance. She was learning more than just survival skills. She was learning about trust and community. The morning passed quickly. Margaret's pouch filled with roots and tubers. She felt a sense of pride in her efforts. She was contributing to their shared survival, and it felt good. Niall nodded in approval, her eyes warm with encouragement. They returned to the camp where Chayton had been busy. He had caught a small rabbit, adding to their food supply. Margaret admired his skill, knowing she still had much to learn. She hoped to master those skills one day to be as capable as her new friends. Margaret helped prepare the meal using the roots she had gathered. She worked alongside Niall and Chayton, feeling a sense of belonging. They cooked the rabbit over the fire, the smell filling the air. It was a simple meal, but it was made with care and teamwork. As they ate, Margaret felt a deep sense of contentment. The food was nourishing, a product of their combined efforts. She watched her babies eat, their small faces bright with joy. They were thriving, and it filled her heart with happiness. After the meal, Margaret took a moment to reflect. She had come so far from that desperate night in the storm. She had learned to trust, to rely on others. Niall and Chayton had become more than just allies. They were friends, part of her new family. But Margaret knew there was still more to learn. She wanted to understand the land better, to become more self-sufficient. She approached Chayton, gesturing to the forest. She wanted to learn more about hunting, about finding food beyond roots and berries. Chayton understood her request. He nodded, agreeing to teach her. They set out together, leaving Niall to watch over the camp. Margaret felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Hunting was a new challenge, but she was ready to face it. Chayton led Margaret through the trees, moving with quiet precision. He showed her how to look for signs of animal activity, how to read the forest. Margaret watched closely, absorbing each lesson. It was a new world, one she was eager to explore. They came across tracks in the snow, signs of a deer passing through. Chayton pointed them out, explaining through gestures how to follow them. Margaret focused, trying to remember each detail. She wanted to get it right, to prove she could handle this new skill. Chayton demonstrated how to move quietly, how to blend into the forest. Margaret mimicked his movements, careful to step lightly. It was challenging, but she was determined. Each step was a new lesson, a chance to grow. The day wore on, and although they didn't catch anything, Margaret learned a lot. She felt more connected to the forest, more aware of its rhythms. Chayton's patience and guidance were invaluable, and she was grateful for his help. As they made their way back to camp, Margaret felt a sense of accomplishment. She had learned so much, gaining confidence in her abilities. The forest was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place of growth and opportunity. Back at the camp, Niall welcomed them with a warm smile. Margaret felt a surge of happiness, knowing she had found a place where she belonged. She sat by the fire, her babies close, feeling a deep sense of peace. The evening was quiet, filled with the soft crackle of the fire. Margaret reflected on her journey, on the friends she had made. She had come so far from the woman left behind in the storm. She had found strength, hope, and a new family. Margaret knew the future was uncertain, but she was ready for whatever came next. With Niall, Chayton, and her babies, she felt a sense of hope. Together, they would face the challenges ahead. Together, they would build a new life, one filled with promise and possibility. The days were growing longer and the air was a bit warmer. Margaret felt the change in the season and it gave her hope. She and her babies were thriving in their new life with Niall and Chayton. The forest was becoming a home full of hidden resources and new friends. Margaret had learned so much and she was grateful for the support and guidance of her companions. One morning, as the sun rose high, Chayton returned to camp with news. His expression was serious and Margaret could see something troubled him. He explained through gestures and words that a group of settlers was nearby. They were not friendly and they were unhappy with the Apache presence in the area. Margaret's heart sank. The thought of danger brought back memories of her own group's betrayal. Margaret felt a mix of emotions. She had found safety and friendship here, but now a new threat loomed. She looked at her babies, who were playing nearby, unaware of the danger. Margaret knew she had to protect them no matter what. Her resolve strengthened. She would not lose the life she had built. Chayton and Niall discussed the situation, their voices low and serious. Margaret watched, trying to understand their plan. She trusted them, knowing they would do everything possible to keep their small family safe. But she also wanted to help, to stand by their side. Margaret approached them, her expression determined. She gestured, indicating she wanted to be involved. Chayton and Niall paused, considering her request. After a moment, they nodded in agreement. Margaret felt a sense of relief. She would not stand by while others defended her home. She would fight for it too. The next few days were tense. Margaret, Niall, and Chayton prepared for the settlers' arrival. They reinforced their camp, gathering supplies and making plans. Margaret felt a mixture of fear and determination. She was scared of the unknown, but she knew she had to be strong. Margaret practiced the skills she had learned. She set snares, gathered food, and prepared the camp. She worked alongside Niall and Chayton, feeling the strength of their bond. They were a team, united by their shared purpose. Margaret knew she could rely on them and they could rely on her. As they worked, Margaret thought about the settlers. She wondered why they were so angry, what made them hostile. She remembered her own experiences, the fear and uncertainty that came with the unknown. But she also knew that fear did not justify violence. She hoped they could find a way to avoid conflict. One afternoon, as Margaret was gathering wood, she heard voices in the distance. Her heart raced, recognizing the sound of settlers approaching. She hurried back to camp, alerting Niall and Chayton. They quickly prepared, ready to face whatever was coming. The settlers appeared at the edge of the clearing, their expressions hard and unfriendly. Margaret stood with Niall and Chayton, her heart pounding. She felt the weight of their anger, but she refused to back down. She had found a home here, and she would not give it up without a fight. The settlers spoke, their words sharp and accusing. Margaret struggled to understand, but she caught the meaning. They wanted the Apache to leave, to make way for their own group. Margaret felt a surge of anger. This land was not theirs to claim. It belonged to no one and everyone. Chayton tried to reason with them, his voice calm and steady. He explained, using gestures and simple words, that they meant no harm. They only wanted to live in peace. Margaret watched, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But the settlers were not interested in talking. Their minds were set. Tensions rose, the air thick with hostility. Margaret felt the fear creeping in, but she pushed it aside. She focused on her babies, on the life she had built. She would not let it be destroyed. She stood firm, ready to defend her home. Suddenly, one of the settlers moved forward, his expression angry. Margaret's heart skipped a beat, fear gripping her. But before anything could happen, Niall stepped in. She spoke softly, her voice calm but firm. Margaret watched in awe as Niall's presence seemed to defuse the situation, at least for the moment. The settlers hesitated, their anger wavering. Margaret felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could resolve this without violence. She prayed for a peaceful outcome, knowing it was their best chance. In the tense silence, the settlers seemed to reconsider. They exchanged glances, their expressions uncertain. Margaret held her breath, waiting for their decision. She hoped they would choose peace, that they would see the value in coexistence. After what felt like an eternity, the settlers turned away, their expressions conflicted. Margaret watched as they retreated, relief washing over her. It was not a victory, but it was not a defeat either. They had avoided conflict, at least for now. Margaret let out a shaky breath, her heart still racing. She looked at Niall and Chayton, gratitude in her eyes. They had stood together, facing the threat as a united front. Margaret felt a renewed sense of strength. She was not alone, and together they could overcome anything. As the sun set, the camp was quiet. Margaret sat by the fire, her babies close. She felt a deep sense of relief, knowing they were safe. The threat had not vanished, but they had faced it together. They had found a way to protect their home without violence. Margaret knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she was ready. She had learned to trust, to rely on her friends. Together, they would face whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but Margaret felt a sense of hope. She had found a family, a home, and a future filled with promise and possibility. The morning after the settlers retreated, the camp was calm. The tension from the previous day had lifted, leaving a sense of relief in its wake. Margaret woke to the soft sounds of her babies stirring. Their small voices were a reminder of the life she had built, the family she had found. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for their safety and the new bonds she had formed. Margaret joined Niall and Chayton by the fire. The atmosphere was light, their spirits lifted by the fact that they had avoided conflict. Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was part of something bigger now, and she was determined to contribute. The events with the settlers had shaken her, but they had also strengthened her resolve. She knew she had to be prepared for the future to ensure the safety of her family. Margaret had learned so much, but there was always more to know. Niall suggested they repair the camp, reinforcing their shelter and gathering more supplies. Margaret agreed, eager to keep busy. The threat of the settlers might have passed for now, but they needed to be ready for anything. Together, they set to work, each task a step toward resilience. Margaret and Niall worked side by side, rebuilding the shelter. They used branches and snow, creating a sturdy wall against the wind. Margaret's hands were steady, her movements confident. She felt a sense of satisfaction in her work, knowing it would help protect her family. While they worked, Chayton ventured into the forest to gather food. Margaret watched him disappear among the trees, feeling a sense of admiration. Chayton was skilled and knowledgeable, a true leader. Margaret hoped to learn more from him, to become as self-reliant and capable. The day passed quickly, filled with hard work and determination. Margaret felt a growing sense of accomplishment. Each task completed was a reminder of how far she had come. She was no longer the woman left behind in the storm. She was a mother, a friend, and a vital part of their community. As the sun began to set, the camp was transformed. The shelter was stronger, the supplies replenished. Margaret felt a deep sense of pride in what they had achieved together. She looked at Niall and Chayton, grateful for their friendship and support. That evening, they shared a simple meal by the fire. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and shared stories. Margaret felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the people around her. They had faced challenges together, and it had brought them closer. Margaret watched her babies play nearby, their laughter a soothing balm. They were happy and healthy, a testament to the life she had built. She felt a surge of love and responsibility, knowing she would do anything to protect them. As the night wore on, Margaret found herself reflecting on the past. She thought about the settlers, about the anger and fear that had driven them. She understood their feelings, but she could not condone their actions. Margaret hoped they would find peace, that they might one day understand the value of coexistence. Margaret's thoughts turned to the future. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she was ready. She had found strength in herself and in her new family. The journey was far from over, but she felt hopeful. Together, they could face anything. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light over the camp. Margaret felt a sense of peace, knowing she was not alone. She had found a home, a place where she belonged. Her heart was full, her spirit strong. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret thought about her journey. She had come so far, learned so much. She had faced fear and uncertainty, but she had found love and friendship. The road ahead was uncertain, but Margaret knew she was ready. With Niall, Chayton, and her babies by her side, she could face whatever came next. The morning would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth. Margaret welcomed them, knowing she was part of a community that would support her. She had found a family, a future, and a sense of purpose. The journey continued, but Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, and she was ready for whatever came next. The days grew warmer as spring approached. Margaret felt the change in the air, a sense of renewal and hope. The harsh winter was ending, and with it came new opportunities. She and her small family were ready to embrace them. Margaret was eager to continue building their life, to create a future for her babies. Margaret, Niall, and Chayton gathered one morning to discuss their plans. The air was fresh, the sun shining brightly. It was time to expand their camp, to create a more permanent home. They needed shelter that could withstand the elements and space for a small garden. Margaret felt excited at the prospect of building something lasting. The three of them set to work, each taking on different tasks. Margaret focused on gathering materials for the shelter. She moved through the forest, collecting branches and stones. Her movements were confident, her purpose clear. She wanted to create a safe and comfortable home for her babies. Niall took charge of the garden. She chose a spot near the camp where the soil was rich and ready for planting. Margaret watched as Niall prepared the ground, her movements skilled and practiced. Margaret felt a surge of gratitude for Niall's knowledge. The garden would provide food and security for their growing family. Chayton worked on expanding the shelter. He reinforced the walls, making them stronger and more durable. Margaret admired his skill, knowing the shelter would protect them from the elements. She felt a sense of security, knowing they were building something that would last. As they worked, Margaret felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Each task completed was a step toward their future. She was creating a home, a place where her babies could grow and thrive. The work was hard, but it was rewarding. Margaret felt a sense of pride in what they were building together. The days passed quickly, filled with activity and purpose. Margaret learned new skills, gaining confidence in her abilities. She felt more connected to the land, more aware of its potential. The forest was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place of growth and opportunity. Margaret spent her afternoons tending the garden with Niall. They planted seeds, working side by side. Margaret felt a sense of peace in the simple act of planting. Each seed was a promise of the future, a testament to their hard work and determination. In the evenings, they gathered around the fire, sharing stories and laughter. The atmosphere was warm, filled with the comfort of friendship. Margaret felt a deep sense of belonging, a connection to the people around her. They were more than just allies. They were family. Margaret watched her babies play nearby, their laughter a soothing balm. They were happy and healthy, a testament to the life she had built. She felt a surge of love and responsibility, knowing she would do anything to protect them. As the shelter took shape, Margaret felt a sense of accomplishment. They had created a home, a place where they could thrive. It was more than she had hoped for, more than she had dared to dream. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden, Niall spoke softly to Margaret. She explained, using simple words and gestures, that the garden was more than just a source of food. It was a symbol of their resilience, their ability to create and nurture life. Margaret understood, feeling the weight of Niall's words. The garden was a testament to their journey, a reminder of how far they had come. Margaret felt a sense of peace as she reflected on their progress. They had faced challenges together, and it had brought them closer. The garden was a symbol of their unity, their shared purpose. It was a place of hope and possibility. As the weeks passed, the garden began to flourish. Green shoots appeared, a sign of life and growth. Margaret felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she watched the plants grow. Each day brought new challenges, but they were ready to face them together. The shelter was completed, a sturdy and welcoming home. Margaret felt a sense of pride in what they had achieved. They had created a safe haven, a place where they could thrive. The forest was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place of growth and opportunity. Margaret knew the journey was far from over, but she felt ready for whatever came next. She had found strength in herself and in her new family. Together, they could face anything. The future was uncertain, but Margaret felt hopeful. She had found a home, a place where she belonged. As the sun set on their newly built home, Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She had come so far, learned so much. She had faced fear and uncertainty, but she had found love and friendship. The journey continued, but Margaret knew she was ready. With Niall, Chayton, and her babies by her side, she could face whatever came next. The world was changing, and so was she. Margaret embraced the future, knowing it was filled with promise and possibility. She had found her place in the world, and she was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would build a life filled with hope and joy. As the days grew longer and warmer, Margaret noticed a change in their small community. Word of their unique family had spread. Other settlers and Apache families began to visit, curious about their partnership. Margaret felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had grown used to their quiet life, but she welcomed the new faces. The first visitors were a family of settlers. They approached with cautious smiles, their curiosity evident. Margaret greeted them warmly, eager to show them the life they had built. Niall and Chayton joined her, their presence a reassurance. The visitors were surprised by the harmony they found, the blend of cultures and traditions. Margaret felt a sense of pride as she showed them around. The garden was flourishing, a testament to their hard work. The shelter stood strong, a symbol of their resilience. Margaret explained, using simple words, how they had come together, how they had learned from each other. The visitors listened, their expressions thoughtful. As the day went on, more people arrived. Some were settlers like Margaret, others were from nearby Apache communities. Margaret watched as they mingled, sharing stories and laughter. The atmosphere was lively, filled with the warmth of friendship. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for the connections they were forming. Niall and Chayton welcomed the visitors with open arms. They shared their knowledge, teaching others about the land and its resources. Margaret watched, feeling a sense of awe at their generosity. They were building something special, a community that celebrated diversity and unity. Margaret found herself drawn to the new families. She listened to their stories, learning about their struggles and triumphs. Each story was different, but they all shared a common theme, the desire for a better life. Margaret felt a kinship with them, knowing they had all faced challenges and overcome them. As the sun set, the camp was filled with the sound of music and laughter. Niall and Chayton led a simple dance, inviting others to join. Margaret watched, feeling a sense of joy. The gathering was a celebration of their journey, a testament to their resilience and hope. Margaret joined the dance, her movements awkward at first. But as she let go of her self-consciousness, she felt a sense of freedom. The music was a balm, soothing her soul. She laughed, feeling the weight of the past lift away. She was surrounded by friends, by family. It was a moment of pure happiness. As the night wore on, the campfire burned brightly. Margaret sat with Niall and Chayton, watching the flames dance. Her babies were asleep, nestled in their blankets. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace, knowing they were safe. She had found a place where she belonged, a family that accepted her. Margaret reflected on the day's events, feeling a sense of fulfillment. They had built a community, a place of acceptance and support. It was more than she had hoped for, more than she had dreamed. The future was bright, filled with promise and possibility. The visitors began to leave, each expressing their gratitude. Margaret watched them go, her heart full. She knew they would return, that their community would continue to grow. She felt a sense of pride in what they had created, in the life they were building. As the camp quieted, Margaret felt a wave of exhaustion. The day had been long, but it had been worth it. She had found joy in the small moments, in the laughter and smiles of her friends. It was a reminder of what truly mattered: love, friendship, and family. Margaret lay down, her babies close. She felt their small breaths, their warmth. They were her reason, her purpose. She had found a home, a place where they could thrive. The journey had been hard, but it had brought her to this moment, to this place. The night was still, the stars bright in the sky. Margaret felt a sense of wonder, a connection to the world around her. She had found her place, her peace. The future was uncertain, but she was ready. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to love. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret thought about the road ahead. There would be challenges, but there would also be joy. She had found strength in herself and in her new family. Together, they could face anything. Margaret embraced the future, knowing it was filled with promise. She had found her place in the world, and she was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would build a life filled with hope and joy. The journey continued, but Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She was home. The days passed peacefully, filled with work and laughter. Margaret's life was full, surrounded by her babies and her new family. She had found a place where she belonged, a community that embraced her. Yet, even in this peace, the past had a way of resurfacing. One morning, as the sun climbed into the sky, a group of settlers arrived. Margaret noticed them from a distance, their figures familiar yet distant. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized them. They were from her original group, the ones who had left her behind. Margaret felt a rush of emotions, confusion, anger, and a hint of fear. She had moved past that part of her life, built something new. But now the past was here, standing before her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She needed to face them to understand why they had come. The settlers approached the camp, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and hope. Margaret watched them, her mind racing. She wondered what they wanted, why they had returned. She hoped they were not here to disrupt the life she had built. Niall and Chayton joined Margaret, their presence a source of strength. Margaret felt supported, knowing she was not alone. Together, they approached the settlers, ready to hear what they had to say. The leader of the group stepped forward, his face lined with weariness. Margaret remembered him well. He had been the one to make the decision to leave her behind. His presence stirred old memories, old pains. He spoke, his voice tentative. He explained that they had faced many hardships since leaving her. The journey had been difficult, and they had lost many along the way. He expressed regret for their actions, for leaving her in the storm. Margaret listened, her emotions swirling. The leader asked for forgiveness, for a chance to make amends. Margaret felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a flicker of understanding. She knew the pain of loss, the struggle to survive. She had faced it herself, and it had shaped her into who she was now. Margaret took a moment to gather her thoughts. She looked at her babies, at Niall and Chayton. She had found a new life, a new family. The past was painful, but it had brought her here. She knew she needed to find a way to move forward. Margaret spoke, her voice calm but firm. She explained the hurt they had caused, the challenges she had faced. But she also spoke of the strength she had found, the hope and love that now filled her life. She was not the same person they had left behind. The settlers listened, their expressions thoughtful. Margaret could see their regret, their desire to make things right. It was not easy to forgive, but she knew it was necessary. Holding on to anger would only hold her back. Margaret took a deep breath, her decision clear. She offered forgiveness, a chance for them to start anew. She knew it would not erase the past, but it was a step toward healing. Margaret felt a sense of relief, a weight lifting from her shoulders. The leader of the settlers expressed gratitude, his relief evident. He promised to respect their community, to honor the life Margaret had built. Margaret felt a sense of closure, knowing she had made the right choice. The settlers stayed for a while, sharing stories and learning from Margaret and her new family. Margaret watched as they interacted, feeling a sense of hope. The past was behind her, and the future was bright. As the settlers prepared to leave, Margaret felt a sense of peace. She had faced her past and she had come out stronger. She had found forgiveness not just for them but for herself. It was a new beginning, a chance to move forward without the weight of old wounds. Margaret watched as the settlers disappeared into the distance, their figures fading into the horizon. She felt a sense of closure, knowing she had taken the right path. The past was part of her story, but it did not define her. Margaret returned to her family, her heart full. She had faced her fears and she had found strength in forgiveness. She had built a life filled with love and hope, surrounded by those who cared for her. The journey continued, but Margaret felt ready for whatever came next. The sun set on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the camp. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace, knowing she was home. She had found her place in the world and she was ready to embrace the future. Together with Niall, Chayton, and her babies, she would face whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but Margaret knew she was ready. The days passed quickly as the warmth of spring enveloped the camp. The garden flourished, a patchwork of green and color. Margaret felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she watched it grow. Her life was full, her heart content. The community around her was thriving, a testament to their hard work and unity. A special day was approaching, and Margaret felt a flutter of excitement. It was the first birthday of her triplets, a milestone that filled her with joy. She wanted to celebrate, to mark the occasion with her new family and friends. The year had been full of challenges, but also full of love and growth. Margaret shared her plans with Niall and Chayton, her eyes bright with excitement. They agreed, eager to help organize the celebration. It would be a day of joy, a chance to reflect on how far they had come. Margaret felt a sense of gratitude for their support and friendship. The preparations began, each task a labor of love. Margaret gathered wildflowers, their colors vibrant and cheerful. Niall and Chayton prepared a feast, using the bounty of their garden and the skills they had honed over the past year. The camp was filled with a sense of anticipation, a buzz of excitement. As the day of the celebration arrived, the camp was transformed. Bright flowers adorned the shelter, their fragrance sweet in the air. The fire crackled warmly, ready to cook the feast they had prepared. Margaret felt a sense of pride as she looked around, knowing they had created something special. Friends and neighbors began to arrive, their faces alight with smiles. Margaret welcomed them warmly, her heart full. The community had grown, each new face a reminder of the connections they had made. Margaret felt a sense of belonging, a deep connection to those around her. The celebration began with laughter and music. Niall played a simple tune, her voice rising in song. Margaret watched as her babies clapped their hands, their faces bright with joy. It was a moment of pure happiness, a testament to the life they had built. As the day went on, the camp was filled with stories and laughter. Margaret listened as friends shared tales of their own journeys, their voices a tapestry of experiences. Each story was a reminder of the strength and resilience of the human spirit. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude as she watched her babies play. They were happy and healthy, surrounded by love and support. It was more than she had hoped for, more than she had dreamed. She felt a surge of love for her family, for the life they had created. The feast was a highlight of the celebration, a testament to their hard work and unity. Margaret helped serve the food, her heart full of pride. The garden had flourished, providing nourishment and sustenance. It was a symbol of their resilience, their ability to create and nurture life. As the sun began to set, the celebration continued. The fire burned brightly, casting a warm glow over the camp. Margaret felt a sense of peace as she watched her babies, their laughter a soothing balm. They were her reason, her purpose. Margaret took a moment to reflect on the past year. She had faced challenges and overcome them, finding strength in herself and in her new family. The journey had been hard, but it had brought her to this moment, to this place. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the path she had taken. As the night wore on, the celebration began to wind down. Friends and neighbors bid farewell, their faces alight with smiles. Margaret watched them go, her heart full. She knew they would return, that their community would continue to grow. Margaret sat by the fire, her babies asleep in her arms. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing she was home. She had found a place where she belonged, a family that accepted her. The journey continued, but Margaret felt ready for whatever came next. The stars shone brightly in the night sky, a reminder of the vastness of the world. Margaret felt a sense of wonder, a connection to the universe around her. She had found her place, her peace. The future was uncertain, but she was ready to embrace it. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret thought about the road ahead. There would be challenges, but there would also be joy. She had found strength in herself and in her new family. Together, they could face anything. Margaret embraced the future, knowing it was filled with promise and possibility. She had found her place in the world, and she was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would build a life filled with hope and joy. The journey continued, but Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She was home. The days settled into a gentle rhythm, each one filled with small tasks and shared moments. Margaret felt a deep sense of contentment as she watched her babies grow, their laughter a constant source of joy. Life in their community was simple but fulfilling. Margaret had found a place where she belonged, surrounded by love and friendship. As the seasons changed, so did the landscape around them. The garden continued to thrive, a symbol of their hard work and unity. Margaret spent her mornings tending to it, her hands deep in the soil. Each new sprout was a reminder of the life they were nurturing, the future they were building. One afternoon, as Margaret sat by the fire, Chayton joined her. His presence was calming, a steady reminder of their shared journey. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames flicker. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for his friendship and support. Chayton spoke, his voice thoughtful. He talked about the future, about the life they were creating. Margaret listened, her heart full. She appreciated his vision, his commitment to their community. They shared hopes and dreams, their conversation a testament to their bond. Margaret found herself reflecting on the past year. She had faced challenges and overcome them, finding strength in herself and in her new family. The journey had been hard, but it had brought her to this moment, to this place. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the path she had taken. The days continued, each one filled with work and laughter. Margaret felt a sense of peace, knowing she was part of something bigger. Their community was thriving, a testament to their unity and determination. Margaret felt a deep connection to those around her, a bond that strengthened each day. One evening, as the sun set, Margaret stood with Chayton. They watched the sky change colors, a beautiful tapestry of light. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace, knowing she had found her place in the world. She had built a life filled with hope and joy, surrounded by love and friendship. Chayton spoke softly, his words a gentle affirmation of their journey. He talked about the future, about the life they would continue to build together. Margaret listened, feeling a sense of calm. She knew they could face anything, that their bond was strong. Margaret thought about her babies, their laughter a constant reminder of the love in her life. They were her reason, her purpose. She felt a surge of love for them, knowing she would do anything to protect them. The future was bright, filled with promise and possibility. As the night settled around them, Margaret felt a sense of closure. She had faced her past, found forgiveness, and created a new life. The journey had been long, but it had brought her to this place of peace and fulfillment. She was ready for whatever came next. Margaret turned to Chayton, her heart full. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for his friendship, for the life they were building together. They stood in silence, the night a comforting presence around them. Margaret knew she was home. The stars shone brightly in the sky, a reminder of the vastness of the world. Margaret felt a sense of wonder, a connection to the universe around her. She had found her place, her peace. The future was uncertain, but she was ready to embrace it. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Margaret thought about the road ahead. There would be challenges, but there would also be joy. She had found strength in herself and in her new family. Together, they could face anything. Margaret embraced the future, knowing it was filled with promise and possibility. She had found her place in the world, and she was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would continue to build a life filled with hope and joy. The journey continued, but Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She was home. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.